What's up, my precious little pack, and welcome back to VEGA Conflict. So, the Alliance War changed, as we all know, and this time around it was a test run. They wanted to see if adding PVE targets into the Alliance War would be any different, but they missed their mark by quite a few thousand light years. First off, what they should have done to implement it was introduce level 30 through 50 as a test run fleet and not completely replace the Alliance War we knew. We still should have had access to everything of the normal Alliance War. The prices shouldn't have been increased for the ships and things like that, especially when the decrease happened. Because the fleets, our fleet equivalent would have been a better payout than what they gave, and it would have still encouraged PvP. However, something I will have to point out, the number of participants. 10,000. I'm trying to think back, even if it's just a few here and there. I'm trying to think back, though, of when so many people tried the Alliance War, so many people tried Civil Wars and things like that, and I can't think of a single time in the past 2 months where Civil War has gone over 10,000, and Alliance War last month, if I'm not mistaken, it was actually at around 8,800 or 900 people. But what did I think of the Alliance War with the change? Well, it was a mistake. It was implemented poorly, and it could have been much more well received by the player base had Kixi actually taken the time to think about the ships that they put in the fleets. Had they actually taken the time to balance them slightly more per level, and actually only introduce 30 through 50 or 30 through 60 as just a test run. And they shouldn't have disabled PvP payout intel, because that was just a major slap to the face to the player base. Because even I logged in, I was expecting to get some clips from the PvP fights, things like that. Not once did I get hit by another player. I was out the entire time. There was hundreds of us in the unknown sector, well, in the unstable sector. And we were just farming. That was it. There was no PvP, there was no anything. And even the coiners that I saw, there was very little PvP even from them. They were mostly farming the AI targets, and most of them, even in chat from what I saw, from my own sector, they were complaining about the spawn rates for the 80s and 90s. Well, for the 90s and 100s, and even I saw it, there was almost none of them spawning the entire time in my own sector. Well, in the unstable sector, I was watching them sit around while I was farming 50s and 60s, and it was just sad seeing them sitting around for longer time than I was waiting for a single fleet. And like I said, this could have been much better had they just left the Alliance War the way it was and just added the targets as a test, because they could have benefited from it in the following way. One, I typically take my secondary fleet out in the first day of a Civil War or Alliance War and I attack another player with it. It's just what I do. I take that fleet out because it's low repair time. I can use it 3 times, and then I use my PvP ships the Marauders have been building up for the rest of the duration. I didn't do that. I took the Marauders out right away. And what was even worse than that, the implementation, like I said, they should have done it the way I said, and they should have asked for feedback and actually altered how they were live, as they love to do, to increase our repair time, but to make the event better. So that was a lost opportunity on their part. They could have enhanced what it was while it was live by paying attention to feedback, but they didn't. And I usually rate the events as either hit or miss. I said in the comment I pinned on the last video that I gave it a miss, and I'm going to give it a miss again, even in this video, just because it was lackluster. There wasn't much to do in it. There's only 2 target types to hit. Granted, you could go through different levels of them, but solar bases, they're necessary for the solar shards, the outposts. And Then there was only the Marauder Pillagers. We couldn't even attack one another for PvP intel. We couldn't get the payout or anything like that because it was disabled for this alliance war. They missed their mark on how they implemented it. They could have done better. Simple as that. And hit or miss, it's a miss. The ways to improve it I've already stated, so I don't need to restate them. The overall feel of the event, it just didn't feel like an alliance war, because typically I go out and I fight other players during alliance war, because that's what alliances do, we fight. This time around I was sitting shoulder to shoulder with a bunch of people and we're just farming up bases, we're farming up the outposts, we're farming up the pillagers. There was literally very little to no PvP. Typically when a javelin goes out, someone tries to jump it. I took my own javelin out as well as watched bunches of others take their javelins out, and not a single one that I saw got hit. A single javelin, the most juicy target to hit just because of its repair time, and not a single one got hit. Now, the event store was that was a mess. First off, we didn't have to get increased solar shards, so we still had to get the same amount that we usually do. However, certain prizes, the price of them was increased in the upper tiers. So last time around, all of these blueprints were only 600,000 intel. Now they're over 1 million, as well as the targets payouts being reduced meant that you had to work even harder. It was like the same thing they did to the Planet Strike. It got moved to the daily rotation, but they reduced the intel payout of the top fleet by 2/3. And they didn't modify the prizes to match that new payout, so it would stay roughly the same as before. So now it's even harder to get the technology than it was in the monthly Planet Strike, because it was run once or twice a month if I'm not mistaken, and not like multiple times a week. So they failed in that regard, because it seems like they were trying to turn the Alliance War into another version of the Planet Strike, and we all know what they did to the Planet Strike was wrong. But now if they want to introduce targets like this into the PvP event, they need to make them so that there are no high level ones, so players will still be fighting at the high level. But when everybody's down and out and we're all farming low levels, it's because our high level fleets are repairing. That would be acceptable, so we have targets and stuff to do to stay in game while our main fleets repair. However, that's not what happened. But my total thoughts on the Alliance for this time around, it was a miss. It was poorly implemented. It could have been better in so many regards, but it wasn't. The players' feedback was highly negative, and it could have been very positive had Kiksa actually altered the fleets and made it so that they were slightly more balanced. They didn't have the Vanquisher carrier in level 30 through 40, possibly even 50. Had they changed the spawn amounts for the 90s and 100s, had they left PvP intel active so we'd still be able to farm each other up for it, and more. Granted, this event had more participation than I've seen in a while, but it was just because they changed it and everyone wanted to see what it was all about, and what they saw was either the following. The fleets were overpowered and they couldn't hit them, or the hits they did make, they could make about 4 or 5 hits against a 40 and then go back for repair time on the low level fleet. And I'm referring to fleets that were level 46 or above. And they went after the 40s, 30s at that, and they were going back with a dead ship and more. But I'm going to go ahead and leave the video here. If you all have anything to add at all, if I may have missed something, if there was a point that I failed to make, feel free to state it below. And if there's actually anything that any of you may have noticed that I may not have noticed during this Alliance War, feel free to state it below in the comments section. And as always, everybody, I'll see you later.